Let me tell you the truth, no one has the guts to say it out loud. Manipulators don't go after the strong. They go after the uncertain. And if you want to make yourself impossible to manipulate, there is one behavior you need to master. Stop. Explaining yourself? Yes. Read that again. Stop. Explaining yourself? You don't owe anyone an explanation for your boundaries. You don't owe anyone a justification for your peace. You don't have to defend your decisions like you're on trial. You're not guilty for choosing yourself. Manipulators feed on your need to be understood. They twist your words. They pretend to be confused. They poke holes in your logic just to make you question your reality. And the moment you start over-explaining, you've handed them the blueprint to control you. When you stop explaining yourself, you take back the power manipulators have been using against you for years without you even realizing it. They don't need to overpower you physically, emotionally, or even financially. They just need you to talk. The more you talk, the more information you give them. The more you explain your decisions, your emotions, your reasons, your fears, the more they understand where to twist the knife. Explaining yourself becomes a trail of breadcrumbs that leads them straight to your weaknesses. Every time you say, "I just didn't want to upset you," you're unknowingly revealing your guilt. Every time you say, "I'm sorry if I was too harsh," you're showing them your need to be liked. You're telling them without even knowing it that your boundary is negotiable, that your no can become a maybe if they just push a little harder, act a little sad, or guilt you a little more. And manipulators live for that. They feed off that dot. You think you're being kind, they think you're being weak. You think you're being polite, they see an opening. You're not in a conversation, you're being profiled. You're being analyzed. Every sentence you offer as an explanation becomes a tool in their arsenal. They'll use your kindness to get away with disrespect. They'll use your empathy to justify their behavior. They'll use your fear of conflict to silence you. And it's not because you're not smart enough to see it. It's because you've been trained to believe that you owe people an explanation. You've been raised to think that silence is rude, that confidence is arrogance, that walking away without a full speech makes you cold. But let me wake you up, manipulators don't respect kindness, they exploit it. They don't honor your explanations, they weaponize them. The more you try to clarify, the more confused they pretend to be. Not because they don't understand you, but because they want you to keep talking. Let's break the lie that saying less is cold. Let's break the lie that holding your boundary without defending it makes you mean. That's not truth. That's conditioning. That's control. And the truth is this: you only need to explain yourself when you're trying to convince someone. But when you're rooted in your truth, when your boundary isn't up for debate, you say it once and you mean it. That's where the power is. Not in yelling, in saying something once, clearly and without apology. I'm not available for that. Period. No footnotes, no disclaimers. No emotional resume. People who genuinely care about you will respect that. Honor it. But manipulators will panic because their game relies on your words. When you stop explaining, you cut off their control. You become a mystery they can't solve, a wall they can't climb, a boundary they can't bulldoze. They can't bait you into a fight because you won't engage. They can't guilt you because you won't take the bait. They can't gaslight you because your silence tells them you see right through them. And that silence, that's the language of power. It shakes people who are used to controlling the room. It confuses people who rely on emotional manipulation to keep you small. It terrifies people who built their influence on your self-doubt. Because now, you're no longer explaining your worth, you're embodying it. And let's be clear, when you stop explaining yourself, people will call you cold. They'll say you've changed. They'll act like you're the problem. But that's just the manipulation, trying one last time to pull you back into the cycle. Don't fall for it. Let them sit in their confusion. Let them talk behind your back. Let them create a version of you in their mind to feel better about losing access to your energy. That's not your burden to carry. Your job is not to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. Your job is not to lower your boundary just to make someone else feel more comfortable in your space. Your job is to protect your peace like it's your life, because it is. You will shock people when you no longer explain why you're unavailable. You will disappoint manipulators when you no longer soften your words to protect their feelings. You will intimidate emotional vampires when you show up with firm boundaries and zero need to explain them. And the moment you realize you don't owe anyone a reason for your growth, your healing, or your choices, the moment they lose their power over you forever. Because what they were clinging to wasn't your kindness, was your need to explain. That need gave them access. That need made you vulnerable. But when that need dies, you're reborn as someone who is no longer emotionally hijackable. You don't have to be aggressive to be powerful. You don't have to argue to prove you're right. You don't have to explain to be respected. You just have to know who you are. Trust what you've chosen. And speak with the kind of calm that terrifies manipulators. That's real power. The quiet, unshakable kind. The kind that makes you immovable. The kind that makes you impossible to manipulate. When you choose silence, you choose power. Asterisk, asterisk, and I'm not talking about passive silence or walking on eggshells to avoid conflict. I'm talking about the kind of silence that makes people uncomfortable because they can't figure you out, can't access your thoughts, can't twist your words. It's the kind of silence that puts manipulators in panic mode because their control relies on your reactions, your defenses, your need to explain. They need you loud, emotional, triggered, defensive. They need you cracked open so they can crawl inside your mind and rearrange your sense of reality. But when you respond with silence, you're no longer part of their game. You've stepped off the chessboard and left them playing with themselves, and nothing shakes a manipulator more than realizing you are no longer available for emotional warfare. Silence is misunderstood by the weak and feared by the toxic because it forces people to sit with themselves. It holds a mirror up to their manipulation. They expect you to beg for clarity, expect you to ask for closure, expect you to defend your boundaries and make them feel okay about being disrespectful. But when you go silent, you flip the script. You stop seeking validation. You stop giving them the audience they need. You stop performing for their approval. And when you do that, the power dynamic dies instantly. Silence becomes your shield. It becomes your protection. It becomes your statement that you are no longer emotionally accessible to people who can't handle your worth. A manipulator's greatest fear is not being yelled at. It's being ignored. It's being shut out. It's being met with a version of you that no longer bleeds just to prove you're human. Silence forces people to hear the echoes of their own behavior. And that echo can be deafening for someone used to hiding behind noise, blame, gaslighting, and control. When you say nothing, they hear everything. They hear your clarity. They hear your confidence. They hear your strength. Most importantly, they hear that they no longer matter enough to shake you. People will call you cold when you no longer dance to their emotional chaos. They will call you rude when you stop responding to manipulation with empathy. But don't let that fool you. That's not the truth. That's the sound of control breaking. That's the tantrum of someone losing access to your mind. The power in silence is that it doesn't negotiate. It doesn't defend. It doesn't chase. It doesn't collapse. Simply is dot. And in a world that teaches you to explain everything, apologize for everything, and soften yourself for everyone, silence becomes a revolution. Silence is not the absence of strength. It is the proof of it. It means you no longer fear being misunderstood. It means you no longer live to convince others of your value. It means you have built such a solid foundation within yourself that their approval no longer holds currency. And the moment you stop reacting, you take back every ounce of power they ever had, because your reaction is their weapon. Your energy is their fuel, but your silence, that's the moment the battlefield empties and they're left standing alone, holding manipulation that no longer works. There are people who will poke and prod just to get a rise out of you. They don't want resolution. They want chaos. They want to see if they still have access to the emotional buttons they used to press. But when you no longer respond, when you stop giving them the satisfaction of a single word, they're forced to confront a new reality. You've evolved. You're not the same version of yourself they used to control. You're not the same person who used to break down trying to be understood. Now you walk away with your dignity. You disconnect with your silence, and you rise without the need to be seen. Silence doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise. It means you understand that not every battle is worth the bruises. It means you know the difference between reacting and responding. And sometimes the most powerful response is no. Response at all. Because when you are silent, you are choosing yourself over the chaos. You are choosing peace over performance. You're choosing freedom over control. And that choice is loud. That choice echoes. That choice says, you no longer have access to my peace. You no longer get to rent space in my mind. You no longer get to define who I am. Your silence is your boundary. It says, I don't engage with disrespect. It says, I've seen this game before and I'm no longer playing. It says, I know my worth and I don't have to prove it to you. It terrifies manipulators because it tells them they're powerless against your self-control. They can throw words. They can invent stories. They can twist narratives but without your energy, it all falls flat. Your silence is the refusal to be baited, the refusal to be drained, the refusal to let chaos borrow your attention. You want to be truly unshakable? Learn to master your silence. Learn to pause before reacting. Learn to observe before engaging. Learn to speak only when your words are aligned with your power, not your pain. Because every time you stay silent when someone expects you to crumble, you show them something far scarier than anger. You show them indifference is a wall they can't climb. They can handle conflict. They can handle yelling. But they cannot handle being invisible to the version of you that no longer needs them to be okay. When you operate from silence, you begin to realize just how many people were only connected to your reactions. They weren't loving you. They were feeding on your energy. They weren't supporting you. They were attached to your emotional availability. Silence filters out the fake. It clears the room. It removes the noise. And what's left? The real ones, the people who don't need you to shrink, explain, or bleed in front of them. The people who respect your silence because they understand your peace is sacred. Choosing silence isn't easy at first. It feels like rejection. Feels like absence. But give it time, and you'll see, it becomes a weapon. It becomes clarity. It becomes your ultimate protection from chaos disguised as conversation. Because once you've learned to be silent in the face of manipulation, mastered the highest form of self-respect. And once you've mastered that, there's nothing they can do to touch you.